Elena, before we went to the break, we were talking about, you were talking about 30%, if you use 30% of the credit that you have.
Right. So we're talking about a debt ratio, really. So when the creditors are looking at your file, if you're using less than 30%, they're going to be happy. So let's round up the numbers. I like to talk about like certain numbers. So for example, you have a credit card of $1,000 credit limit. And if you're only using 30%, that would be about $300. And $300 is absolutely acceptable. So if you start to climb up on that, maybe let's say $500, that's 50%. And if you go up to 700, that's 70%. If you go up to 900, then you're looking at 90%.
Mhm.
And the creditors are only comfortable when you're using less than 30%. And also that the less that so they want you to use your credit card. They also want you to use it wisely, and they want you to make sure that you don't use the whole thing all at once, because then if you can't pay it, then that full amount's going to be outstanding. But if you're only using 30% and you're going to take your time paying that off within maybe 3 months to a year or a year and a half, they're going to be comfortable with that. But the other way, they're not going to be so comfortable. Therefore, your credit score is going to drop.
So 30% is a very crucial number for people to understand. Now, I want to ask you this question because I talked about it in the intro of the show. How does joint credit impact your score?
Well, it really that is it's a great question because you don't really have joint credit. When you get married, you'll still have your separate credit score, credit history. The only time you have joint credit is when you actually get a credit card that's joint, or you co-sign on a car loan or a mortgage. That's the only time those that credit information is going to be considered joint, and it's going to show independently on each consumer's file. So for example, it'll show that spouse A will show um, ABC credit card. Spouse B it will show ABC credit card. If they're both making payments on time, it will show that. If you're not making payments on time, it will also reflect that. So it's very important to understand that when you have a joint credit card or any type of joint credit, it will impact your credit score um, based on your payment ability.
So this is going to segue into the next question now. Should you keep your credit separate from your partner? Meaning, I know a lot of women don't have a credit card in their name. They may have a supplementary credit card from their spouse, and say their marriage ends up breaking down. They actually don't have their own credit score. Is this true?
It's true. If they've only ever had one credit card or several credit cards with their spouse, then yes, that's absolutely true. That information will be reflected on each other's credit information. However, each creditor is going to be it's going to react differently. So if you ever want to, so if you're thinking, well, I'm going to get separated or I'm going through a divorce and I'm going to need to, divide my or part ways with from my credit, it the creditors may each creditor will decide differently. So some creditors will say, okay, you know what? As long as you pay everything off, you're going to have to reapply for a new credit card, and we will then review your situation accordingly. Others will say, the debt has the sure we can remove your name, especially if there's no debt on that credit card. So that should be okay. Again, it's important to go back to the actual creditor and figure out exactly what their requirements are so that you can meet them, and then you can apply for credit and start to establish something on your own. Women tend to rely on their partners, but also men tend to rely on their partners. So some people just don't understand what their consumer rights are. So it's important to ask and find out exactly what you need in order to get back on your feet.
One of the things I talked about in the very beginning of the show was that, if you have a good credit score, you actually will end up living in a better location or have a better situation for where you live.